I was 32 years old, standing in a sterile municipal courthouse, wearing an $89 dress I'd bought online. The scratchy lace was a constant, physical reminder of my worth to the people who were supposed to love me. The fluorescent lights cast a sickly yellow glow. The air reeked of industrial wax and stale coffee, and there was no string quartet, no fresh flowers, and absolutely no family waiting for me. My husband Julian was the brilliant co-founder of a software startup, just 6 weeks shy of going public with a secret $50 million valuation. We could have had the kind of wedding featured in glossy magazines, but instead, I stood in that drab courthouse because, on that exact same Saturday, all 40 of my living relatives were celebrating my older sister Brooke's 30th birthday across town. My mother Madeline chose Brooke's party. My younger brother Austin chose her party. Every single person who shared my bloodline looked at the calendar and consciously chose a birthday party over my wedding day. 3 weeks after I signed my marriage license, the world shifted. Julian's company launched its IPO, and our private reality became very public. 6 weeks after that, my mother called, uttering the words that validated every bitter thought I'd ever harbored. "Honey, we need to talk about the family right away. Your brother is in terrible trouble." But here's what my mother, my sister, and the rest of them didn't understand. I had been quietly, methodically preparing for that phone call since the morning after I said my vows. I didn't scream or throw a tantrum. I simply took my time and built a wall so high, so impenetrable, and so legally binding that they would never be able to reach into my pockets. The Overton family had a strict, unspoken hierarchy, a well-oiled machine of favoritism, manipulation, and deep financial entitlement. For 32 years, I existed at the very bottom. I was the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who could just absorb the neglect. But standing in that courthouse, holding Julian's hand, I realized a truth that fundamentally changed the trajectory of all our lives. You cannot demand blind loyalty from someone you have already erased. This is the story of how my family threw me away when they thought I was a nobody, and how they desperately clawed at my front door when they realized I had everything. To understand how 40 people could abandon a bride without a second thought, you have to understand the toxic architecture of the Overton family. My mother, Madeline, ran our household like a high-stakes theatrical production, demanding total control over the public narrative. Every holiday, every milestone, every Sunday dinner was a heavily curated performance, designed to make us look perfect. Madeline was the ruthless director, and Brooke was always the leading lady, inheriting everything my mother valued. Volume, a demanding physical presence, and a relentless sense of entitlement my mother confused with confidence. If Brooke entered a room, she sucked all the oxygen out of it, and my mother ensured everyone clapped. Then there was Austin, the charming baby boy, the supporting actor who could do no wrong. If Austin made a catastrophic mistake, he just needed a little more patience. I remember when he totaled his brand new car at 19, driving recklessly. My mother didn't ground him. She demanded I drain my savings to pay his insurance deductible because, in her words, he was just a boy finding his way. And then there was me. I was the stage crew. I showed up early, did all the heavy lifting, cleaned up the emotional messes, and was expected to disappear into the shadows before the curtain call. My parents' chaotic divorce when I was 11 left my father, Garrison, to move 3 states away and effectively check out of parenting. My mother was left to raise us, making it brutally clear who was a priority and who was a burden. I remember being 11, standing alone in a humid school gymnasium, holding a second-place certificate for the regional science fair. I'd built a complex circuitry project all by myself. All the other kids had beaming parents taking pictures, but I was utterly alone. My mother had promised to come, but never showed, because Brooke threw a tantrum over a last-minute dress fitting. When I walked home alone in the rain and quietly handed my mother the certificate, she barely looked up from the television. She patted my shoulder without making eye contact and said the phrase that would become the defining curse of my life. "You are so flexible, Gwen. Thank you for understanding. You are flexible." I heard those exact words for the next 2 decades, whenever they canceled plans, forgot a milestone, or when my accomplishments were overshadowed by Brooke's minor dramas or Austin's major disasters. I was told how incredibly flexible I was. In my mother's vocabulary, flexible meant, "You're the one we don't have to consider. You're the one who won't complain. You are the emotional dumping ground." I learned early that being highly competent was the fastest way to become completely invisible. The louder you screamed for help, the more attention and resources you received. I stopped asking for help by 13. I moved out at 18 with a partial academic scholarship, a tiny savings account, and a burning desire to disappear. While my family comfortably ignored my existence, Julian and I were entering the most exhausting, intense, and consequential period of our lives. The startup he co-founded 3 years earlier was rapidly approaching its initial public offering. For those unfamiliar with the tech world, An IPO is when a private company lists its shares on the stock exchange for the public to buy. It's the moment hypothetical paper wealth transforms into actual tangible money. To get there, Julian was working 14-hour days, leaving before sunrise and returning long after I'd gone to bed. His startup had burned through 2 rounds of venture capital funding and outgrown 3 office spaces. The pressure was immense. Every line of code had to be perfect, every database scalable, every financial audit spotless. I was working just as hard at my own engineering job, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy while our lives hurtled toward a massive financial cliff. We barely saw each other, communicating mostly through quick texts and tired smiles over cold coffee in the mornings. April 5th, a Tuesday, was the day everything shifted permanently. I was at my desk when I got a text from Julian. Look at the news. I opened a financial news website. There it was. Julian's startup had officially gone public. The IPO opened at $14 per share and surged to $19 by market close. The company valuation was officially $50 million. Julian, as co-founder and CTO, held roughly 8% of the company. On paper, by the time I refreshed the browser page that afternoon, his personal stake was worth just over $4 million. I had my own small equity stake from my company, but this was different. This was life-altering wealth. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. The office around me was loud, but I felt like I was in a vacuum. When Julian came home that night, he looked completely dazed. He dropped his keys, leaned against the wall, and whispered, "It is real. It actually happened. We didn't go to a fancy steakhouse or pop expensive champagne. We sat on our sagging second-hand couch in our cramped 1-bedroom apartment, eating $12 pad thai out of cardboard containers. We watched the financial news coverage on mute. $4 million in equity, a $50 million company, and we were eating cheap noodles in an apartment where the radiator clanked loudly every 30 minutes. Julian, a stray noodle hanging off his fork, looked at me and said, "We should probably start looking at houses." I smiled, pulled my laptop onto my lap, and replied, "I already have a spreadsheet of neighborhoods." He laughed. He shouldn't have been surprised. I had been researching real estate listings since his partner first mentioned the timeline months ago. That was who I was, competent, prepared, quietly building a foundation. Nobody in my family had any idea what had just happened to my bank account, and I had no plans to tell them. I was perfectly content to let them live in their curated bubble while I built a fortress in mine. We closed on our new house exactly 11 days after the company went public. We paid $3.8 million for a modern farmhouse on 2 private acres, 20 minutes outside the city. It had 5 bedrooms, massive floor-to-ceiling windows, and an open-concept kitchen with a marble island that could easily seat 12. We paid using a combination of our savings and proceeds from a secondary share sale Julian had quietly, legally arranged months prior. It wasn't a reckless purchase. It was deeply calculated. The numbers only worked because we had spent the last 3 years living in a tiny apartment, saving over 60% of our combined income. I walked through the empty rooms on the first day we got the keys. My footsteps echoed off the pristine hardwood floors. Sunlight poured through the massive windows, casting long, bright rectangles across the empty space. 5 bedrooms for 2 people who had spent their entire relationship crammed into 900 square feet. Before the moving trucks even arrived, before a single piece of furniture was delivered, I placed one specific item in the house. I took the marriage certificate from the county courthouse, which I had put in a simple gold frame. The raised seal of the county clerk was visible in the lower corner. I hung it on the wall just inside the front entryway, perfectly at eye level. Anyone walking through our massive custom front door would be forced to look at it before they saw the vaulted ceilings or the expensive fixtures. The certificate cost $27, the frame cost $12. It was objectively the cheapest item in a $3.8 million house, but it was the only thing that truly mattered. I stood in the entryway and looked at my name, Julian's name, and the date, March 15th, the day 40 people chose a birthday party over me. 2 days before our furniture was scheduled to arrive, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Cassandra, my one true friend, saying, "You need to see this immediately." I opened the link. It was an article from a local society blog, detailing Brooke's extravagant 30th birthday party. The photos showed my entire family, dressed in designer clothes, clinking champagne glasses. My mother, Madeline, was quoted extensively, gushing about her perfect daughter. My heart hammered against my ribs, but it wasn't anger. It was a cold, quiet satisfaction. They were still living in their curated bubble, completely unaware of the fortress I had built. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, and deleted the text. 6 months passed after that day at the dining table. A lot of things changed, and the consequences of their actions finally caught up to them, without me there to act as a shield. Austin was forced to enter a state-funded rehabilitation program in late August. He didn't go voluntarily. A court ordered him into the facility after he formally defaulted on his personal loans. and the anonymous lender pursued aggressive legal action against him. The state program was free, and my money was never involved. Last I heard, he was 4 months sober, but I don't check in on him. That is his journey to walk, not mine to carry. My mother was forced to sell her large house in September to cover the remaining gaps in Austin's debts. She downsized to a cramped one-bedroom condominium 40 minutes away from where we grew up. She spent the entire fall telling our extended family that I was a greedy, heartless monster who had turned my back on my own blood during our darkest hour. Some of the relatives believed her completely, but 3 different cousins quietly reached out to me through private messages weeks apart, all saying variations of the exact same thing. I would have come to the house if your mother hadn't told me it was cancelled. I thanked them for their kind words, but I did not invite them to my home. The bridge was already burned. Brooke sent me exactly 1 text message in October. It contained only 7 words. I shouldn't have moved the party date. I read the message on my screen. I did not type a response. Maybe I will one day, or maybe I never will. I haven't decided yet, and for the first time, I am entirely comfortable not knowing. My father actually sent a card for my 33rd birthday in November. There was no money inside, no long, emotional letter begging for forgiveness, just a simple signature that said, "Happy birthday, Gwen. I hope you are doing well, Dad." It was the very first birthday card he had bothered to send me in over 20 years. I kept it in a drawer. Julian and I settled beautifully into our new life. We hosted Cassandra for loud, messy dinners every Friday night. We adopted a chaotic terrier mix from a local shelter, who immediately chewed through 2 expensive couch cushions. And we just laughed about it. My financial lockup period ended, and I diversified my own portfolio with the help of a professional financial advisor who was absolutely not related to me. The family group chat still technically exists on my cell phone. I never deleted it, I just completely stopped opening it. The $27 marriage certificate still hangs in the front entryway of my $3.8 million home. Every single morning, I walk past it on my way to the kitchen to make coffee. Most mornings, I don't even notice it anymore. It just blends into the background of a happy, stable life. And that feels exactly right. People on the internet sometimes ask me if I regret any of it. They ask if I regret having a cheap courthouse wedding, or handing my mother a legal document, or refusing to save my brother from ruin. I don't regret a single second of it. My mother taught me one incredibly true thing during my childhood, even if she never meant it as a compliment. She said it like it was a description of my inherent weakness. She said, "You're flexible, Gwen. You always have been." She was absolutely right. I was flexible enough to leave a toxic home at 18 and build a successful career from nothing. I was flexible enough to marry the brilliant man I loved in a sterile courthouse, with exactly 1 friend and no fresh flowers, and feel absolutely 0 shame about it. I was flexible enough to sit across a beautiful dining table from 4 people who had completely erased my existence, and hand them a legally binding document that firmly stated I was done being used. And most importantly, I was flexible enough to finally realize that walking away to protect your own peace is not cruelty. It is not petty revenge. It is not bitterness. It is simply the first honest, loving thing I had ever done for myself. 42 rejected cards, 1 $89 dress, 4 white envelopes, and a $27 marriage certificate hanging in a house I bought with my own success. That is not a sad, tragic story about a broken family. That is a story about a boundary, and that is my story.